Hello everyone, welcome to you everywhere around the world. It is time for Semi-Final 2. Rich Hagan, Brian David Marshall and Luis Scott Vargas in the booth with you, and we are about to see Shaun McLaren of Canada. There you see him, the Pro Tour Born of the Gods champion, looking for a second Pro Tour title in 4 attempts. Crazy stuff. Standing in his way from the United States, there he is from Team Face-to-Face Games, Mike Sigrist. He paced the field. He was the last undefeated player in the building, and right now he's down to the last 3. Let's see what happens. Brian David Marshall, what's the matchup? What can we expect?
Well, we have Jeskai wins in the hands of the Pro Tour champion, and we have an Abzan aggro deck that eschews playing Courser of Krufix and Selvin Caryatid in the hands of Mike Sigrist, the Grand Prix champion.
So already you see McLaren's cards in hand: Strand, Mountain, Temple, 3 land, and then 3 spells. No creatures, 2 of them, well, one's a virtual creature, I guess, Magma Jet and Stoke the Flames, plus Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker.
Yeah, I mean, Shaun plays his deck almost very much like a burn deck.
Yeah, Shaun has got a more controlling / burning deck than a lot of the other decks here. He's got less creatures, only 1 Secret of the Way, for example. Main deck Anger of the Gods, and then the full 4 dig through times, the max allowable. unless you count Treasure Cruise, in which case he's playing 4 of a possible 8.
Do you think we'll see decks that go to the full 8?
The full 8, probably not, unless
But
you're talking about a combo
you'd like
deck.
to believe that was a real world.
Yes. But in general, I think that playing 4 dig through time is already quite the statement. I mean, Rich was asking before we started, like, hey, who do you think's more of the beatdown deck here? And it's like, well, it's not the deck with 4 dig through times.
Yeah.
So Thoughtseize is resolving here, and Shaun McLaren chooses to break a fetch land and get Magma Jet Mike Sigrist so he can scry, look at the top 2 cards and not have that card pulled out of his hand.
Yeah, and if you look at McLaren's hand, I mean, besides the Magma Jet, Stoke, Sarkhan, and Dig Through Time all cost a lot of mana. So he wants to get rid of the cheapest card because he's afraid it would get Thoughtseized while setting up his draw. I mean, he really does want to hit a 3. Like, turn 3 is really important for the Jeskai deck.
All right, so now we get to see those cards. Of course, Dig Through Time right up there at 8, but not really. Mana cost very misleading in terms of the Delve cards. Stoke the Flames, see the Sarkhan there. So what does Sigrist go for? He goes for the Planeswalker. In this standard, we've already seen how important Planeswalkers are. Ari Lax getting through to the final on the back of Elspeth Sun's champion twice. And so Shaun McLaren will have to make do without at least 1 copy of his Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker.
It's a pretty action-packed turn, too.
Yeah, and Sarkhan matches up very well against the double Anafenza that is in Sigrist's hand. I mean, he's expecting the first one to get stoked, but he doesn't want the second one to get Sarkhan, because that's, getting devoured by a dragon is a lot worse than trading for a burn spell. And it looks like McLaren's got his 1 Secret of the Way ready to come out and rumble.
Yeah, he has drawn it, and there it is.
Good. So 2/2, Prowess, and the chance to up his life total.
Do we have an untapped 3rd land?
Does not appear so. It looks like Thoughtseize, Sandstep Citadel, or potentially Rakshasa Death Dealer plus Sandstep Citadel is the play here.
Do you want to try that again? Rakshasa Death Dealer plus Sandstep Citadel?
It's got a Phantom H in the second one there.
Fine.
It's like how you don't pronounce some letters. This one you do pronounce it even though it's not there.
Okay, fair. So 2 mana, here is the Death Dealer.
Yeah, we're just going to go with Death Dealer.
Let's do that.
It's a deal.
3.
Rakshasa Lisp Maker.
Playtest name? So let's get back to the action. McLaren 19, Sigrist 16.
And McLaren drew a very good card this turn. He drew a Goblin Rabble Master, so he has the one of the classic lines of play this deck is capable of, which is he can play Rabble Master, make a token before attacks, convoke and stoke the Death Dealer if he chooses to do so, which I like. I mean, that puts 2 creatures on the board versus nothing, and sets up next turn casting a dig, and so he's using his mana incredibly effectively.
Right, so he gets to play his 4th land. The Goblin Rabble Master becomes 2 creatures, so 4th land and 3 creatures equals Stoke the Flames. And that sounds like exactly what he's going to do.
Rabble Master time. Here comes Token. Yep. Go away, Death Dealer, and I'm going to smash.
Okay. Yep.
One card, but it's actually 2 cards.
Mm-hmm.
Although we know that there's a Thoughtseize in hand, so would you Thoughtseize him and take the dig through time here?
Problem with that is if you Thoughtseize and play a tap land here, you're taking actually millions of damage. you're getting attacked next turn for like 10 damage or 8 damage. It looks like.
So instead, he has to play Anafenza.
Yeah, if you just Thoughtseize and take 8 plus it's 10 with you when you count the Thoughtseize, like you're in a position where you just can't win. So you're just gonna have to live with the fact that a dig is happening.
Well, as it turns out, he may just be taking 1 million damage here. I saw a red card.
Yeah, I think it was a Temple of Epiphany, which, again, it doesn't change this attack. I mean, at this point, attacking with the Rabble Master itself is profitable because it's now a 4/2 because of the other goblins.
So that's going to trade for Anafenza. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's Dig.
Digs now so that the Seeker of the Way becomes a 3/3 with lifelink.
And I think that dig is just going to be 8 points of burn, it looks like.
Because that's 2 Jeskai Charm right on the right. The first 2 cards off the top would have been Jeskai Charm, Jeskai Charm.
Well, there's actually a Mana Strider. Actually, given that Sigrist is probably going to tap out next turn, it's also very defensible to basically take... Well, I mean, no matter what, he's taking a burn spell. It's a 3/3 haste flying burn spell, a 3 mana 4 damage burn spell, a Stoke the Flames, or Lightning Strike, or Magma Jet. I mean, McLaren's got his option of burn spells here. Basically, the only card I think that you can't take is Mystic Monastery.
So away 5 go, as they must.
5. I gain 3. 22. Is this guy exile? Yeah.
Just confirming that the Goblin Rabble Master is exiled when it bites the dust.
And the ability of Anafenza, as you can see there. The bane of my Commander play sessions this weekend. Try to play Sidisi against Anafenza. It doesn't match up well.
Land drawn for Mike Sigrist.
Now a Thoughtseize.
And he will see the 2 cards that Shaun McLaren went for. Charm and Rider.
And this is the information in Sigrist's hand that he's got to be thinking about when he chooses which card he's going to remove. He's holding another Anafenza. He's got a Sorin Solemn Visitor and a Plains.
Yeah, and so he's going to play potentially either here, though Anafenza looks a little more appealing. I mean, I think his best chance of winning the game maybe is to try to set up Anafenza plus Sorin +1. But if he's leaving a Jeskai Charm and gets Anafenza put on top, that doesn't seem like it works. So yeah, I like casting with Sorin, given that you just took the Mana Strider.
So Sorin will have 2 counters.
So now McLaren has, one option, which is just to use Jeskai Charm to kill the vampire by putting it on top and attacking for 5, probably 2 at the Sorin. But he left a Magma Jet on top, so that's going to make this turn a little bit easier.
So there's Magma Jet to take out the vampire. Jeskai Charm you, smash, and thank you very much. And just like that, well, it turns out that who's the beatdown in game 1 at least was Shaun McLaren with his dig through times. He just butchered his way through game 1.
Yeah, I mean, that Seeker of the Way into Rabble Master, I mean, those 2 draws in sequence made the game go from what looked like a pretty close game, possibly in Sigrist's favor, Anafenza's pretty good, to just a complete blowout in McLaren's favor.
Well, in about 25 minutes less than the game 1 we saw in the first semi-final, we are headed for sideboards. So why don't we take a look at the sideboard of Shaun McLaren, your Pro Tour Born of the Gods champion. And he has this to work with. 2 End Hostilities from cards of Tarkir. There you see the mythic Keranos, God of Storms, indestructible 6/5. 3 Dissolve. 2 Anger of the Gods, the Sweeper, one single disdainful stroke to get rid of big fat things, 2 negates, a Phyrexian Revoker, which is a card Luis has already talked about in the booth here this afternoon, and a couple of erase. So, Luis, where do we go here?
I think that McLaren's going to want to look at the sweepers here with End Hostilities and Anger of the Gods performing fairly well against what Sigrist is going to try to beat him down with. End Hostilities actually kills bestow creatures too. I mean, that's a often overlooked clause because it actually kills Herald of Torment completely dead, even if it's attached to something.
Somebody in the FFL must have been crushing with a bestow deck when they made this
The
card.
future league back at Wizards R&D. Mm-hmm.
I think what's very interesting about Shaun McLaren's sideboard is how much of it is dedicated to what actually turned out to be his quarterfinal matchup.
Yeah, I mean, he thoroughly crushed Li Shitian.
Yeah, he has 11 cards in his sideboard that are there for that matchup specifically. And I'm wondering if you feel like, has that left him less prepared at all for other matchups? Or does this look like the cards that he chose are flexible enough?
Well, Erases and Revoker are pretty narrow. I would not expect those to be good in other matchups, really. I mean, maybe here and there they're okay. Right. But the dissolves and negates, those are just quite good, and especially since he's got 4 dig-through times. He's set up to board it up to a bunch of counterspells, wraths, and dig-through times. I mean, he actually just turns into straight blue-white-red control at that point.
Well, red-blue-white control, that sounds achingly familiar. Why don't we see what's on the other side of the table? Mike Sigrist, who finds himself 1-0 down. This is his board. A single Silence the Believers. He's also got a couple of erase to work with. And then look at the removal. 3 Bile Blight, 3 Drown in Sorrow, a bit more discard action in terms of 2 Despise, a Singleton Whip of Erebos, which was not good in the first semi-final, but maybe very different here, 2 Wingmate Rock, and a Singleton Planeswalker. It's a Ajani, Mentor of Heroes. BDM, take a look at that lot.
Wingmate Rock looks like the kind of card that if he can, he's very aggressive in game 1, but maybe if he can slow the game down a little bit, bring in a little bit of spot removal and, stick a rock, that's exactly the kind of card that's going to let him climb back into a game.
Yeah, it's very good against Anger of the Gods, which McLaren actually has a 4 available to him.
Right.
So that is appealing about the rock. It's less good against End Hostilities because you kind of, since it already requires a creature in play, you're really overextending into it. But I do think Wingmate Rock is good enough. It just trades so well with the 1/1 removal. Whip of Erebos is also a card which we found to be very good against the Jeskai decks, just because when their plan is to burn you out, playing Whip and gaining 8 life right away is huge. And it means that each of your Siege Rhinos just guaranteed does an additional 3 to them.
Now, I may not have been paying attention, but it sounded like between the two of you, you kind of implied that they both may be sitting there trying to become the control deck in Game 2.
No. Sigrist is boarding in controlling cards for sure. I mean, he is boarding in slower cards that we've seen control the game. He still has to actually attack McLaren to death, like before dig through time, makes, Shaun McLaren get too far ahead.
Right, so he is still not looking for a long game. It's just that he's got some cards to bring in to clear the path.
Well, he's looking for Shaun McLaren to mulligan to 4 and make no plays. But
well, that even when that plan doesn't work out, he is looking for the game to be relatively short.
All right, well, the players are drawing their opening hands. There you see them. 4, 5, 6, 7 for Sigrist. He will be on the play, so he gets first choice of whether to keep his 7.
And if that last card was not a Llanowar Wastes or some other land, then he almost assuredly would have been shipping it back. But given that it was, I mean, this looks like a plausible hand. I mean,
and it looks like we are ready to rock and roll. Here we go with game number 2. McLaren, the former Pro Tour champion, looking to get to another final. He's 1 game away. Sigrist with work to do, 1-0 down.
So, Thoughtseize, playing it on turn 1 versus turn 2?
I like playing it on turn 2. McLaren has no 1-drop, so you certainly don't need to Thoughtseize him turn 1 to stop anything. Playing it a turn later lets you see an additional card, and given that, Sigrist's hand had 1 tap land and now a second one, it actually makes it even perfect. Turn 1 tap land, turn 2 tap land, Thoughtseize is a good curve.
Yep, so you see the 4 land and 3 spells in McLaren's hand. There's Stoke the Flames, Jeskai Charm, and Lightning Strike. There's the Jeskai Charm. Love all of those abilities. Great cards, the Charms.
Yeah, the Charms are awesome, and I generally agree with what Sigrist is doing here as well, where you like to Thoughtseize before playing a Scry Temple. The reason being that it's more important to get them extra information by looking at their hand to know what you want to keep. Like, for example, in this, given that McLaren's hand is now just a Jeskai Charm and a Lightning Strike, you don't really need to keep, say, something like a Bile Blade if you see that on top. Because now you get to scry correctly here. I mean, you would have gotten additional information from scrying, but I think it's more important to do it the other way around.
Let's take a look at what is going on in Mike Sigrist's hand. You see the Rakshasa Death Dealer, Abzan Charm, and a couple of Sorens.
Yeah, and what he would like to have come out here is like an Anafenza, but it looked like he went with the kind of the safe route of keeping a Windswept Teeth on top, which I like. I mean, you want to be able to cast Soren here, because each Soren, even though it dies to a burn spell, still 2-for-1s. It still leaves a bat, flying in play. And you also have the option of just +1ing Soren immediately, getting it up to 5, where it also eats 2 burn spells.
We're going to see the Rakshasa Death Dealer from Sigrist.
Ready to, play the role of the Secret Service here and jump in the way of a Lightning Strike.
Yeah, I would be pretty surprised if Sigrist didn't Lightning Strike it here, especially since it looks like he's got a dig through time kind of, looking to be fueled here.
Yeah, McLaren.
Oh, actually it looks like a Disdainful Stroke. So that was actually a pretty good draw. His one Disdainful Stroke in order to stop the Soren that, Sigrist is almost assuredly going to try and play next turn. That gives you even more incentive to Lightning Strike here, since if you don't do it now, eventually the Rakshasa becomes immune to Lightning Strikes.
Yeah, and Mike has been really good about keeping his mana saved on the Rakshasa.
Yeah, I mean, he understands that even though he's the aggro deck, he doesn't actually need to tap out when he has that in play. I mean, just pressuring incrementally is enough.
So there is the Lightning Strike. What have your impressions of Disdainful Stroke been this weekend?
It's definitely a strong card. I mean, I think, it's definitely worth playing. It seems like a much better sideboard card than main deck card to me. The guys on our team who played it, like Josh and Ben, and Shahar, they had it in their sideboard to board in for the green matchups where you want to stop Siege Rhino. It's not a 2-drop counterspell in the way that we normally think of them. It's not a traditional, Mana Leak, you cast it on turn 2. Because you actually can't even cast it on turn 2.
Right.
You can't cast it until later in the game. But it's still a 2-mana counterspell at that point. And I think it's a very effective card, but while not being oppressive, because there's a way around it. You just play cheap spells.
Right. Does the fact that it can't counter something on turn 2 keep it from being a 4 of?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that, we saw Ivan Flock draw multiple of them and not be able to cast any of them. Like, he had a game where he had one in play against Mike Sigrist here, who just wasn't able to use any of them in any way.
More land arriving for Sigrist. So here is 1, 2, 3, 4 Soren. And here is no from Shaun McLaren. Back we go to the Canadian. Jeskai Charm.
McLaren's kind of out of gas here. I mean, he's got double Jeskai Charm, so he's going to be able to trade a little bit, but McLaren needs to draw Dig Through Time. I mean, this is a situation where Dig Through Time just is completely insane. Since right now, Sigrist is going to get a 2-for-1 one way or another off this Soren, and, as a result, McLaren's going to be a little bit behind. He only has 2 spells available. And Sigrist has an Abzan Charm in hand, so he's just going to be drawing 2 pretty soon here, as well as leaving the card on top pretty quickly with that Scry Temple. So,
He's like, ooh, that's a good one.
So what would you put him on top when you see someone leave it there that quickly?
Siege Rhino?
At this point in the game, basically any creature, I would say. Almost any creatures are going to be good enough to keep, just because you just need a spell. But McLaren, if he draws Dig Through Time, he's going to be able to cast it for 2 mana here and draw, basically guaranteed 2 good spells. So Sigrist basically just has to hope that McLaren doesn't draw Dig Through Time in the next 3 or 4 turns. So McLaren likely, going to start by killing Soren and then decide whether he wants to deal with the bat. He can take a few hits if he wants. My inclination, if I'm in McLaren's seat, is you're not going to burn out Sigrist at any point soon here. You have no permanent source of damage or more burn spells. So I would probably just want to kill the bat. It's pretty unfortunate, but if you're looking at Sigrist playing another creature this turn, you just can't take that many hits.
Okay, so let's see what Sigrist kept.
Looks like an Anafenza.
Tis. So Shaun McLaren starting to run out of time. He does have a loss to give, of course.
He's running out of both time and dig through time, since either of those things would work for him. And now you almost can't avoid using the Jeskai Charm in this case to put Inoffensive back, because if you let Sigrist attack, it makes the Vampire a 3/3, which at that point means that you're taking a lot of extra damage.
McLaren passes. All his mana up. And there we are indeed. Jeskai Charm on the Unoffensive the foremost. The clan leader.
Yep.
Sigrist can draw 2 cards with the Charm and hope to hit an untapped white source here to recast the Inoffensive.
So he's arranging his mana, but he's just going to pass the turn at this point.
Yeah, my suspicion is that he wants to use the Charm maybe to deal with like something like Mantis Rider or even a Sorin if it's attacking, or a Sarkhan rather if it's attacking. He also didn't play a Temple of Malady because he knows his top card is great.
So this vampire's kind of sticking around.
Right, and this is the 2-for-1 you were talking about.
I mean, that's 6 points of damage now. That's gone 18 to 12.
A little slower on the keep here. So there goes the Inoffensive.
And despite McLaren, again, being behind, I think 1 dig through time still has a pretty good shot at breaking this game open.
So let's talk a little bit about what these guys did sideboard-wise. Shaun McLaren brought in 3 Dissolve, 1 Disdainful Stroke, and 1 Phyrexian Revoker. And took out 2 Banishing Light, 2 Anger of the Gods End. I'm sorry, Luis, 1 dig through time.
I bet he's regretting that now. So he actually hasn't drawn any sideboard cards except for potentially the Disdainful Stroke, which he would have rather had been a stroke at that point anyway. So.
Mike Sigrist, on the other hand, went up +1 Erase, +3 Bile Blight. Oh, there we go. That's the game.
Yeah, McLaren just drew like 3 land in a row,
Yeah.
and with a clock of 7 or 8 points of damage a turn, that did not last long.
And 2 Wingmate Rocks, -2 Air of the Wilds, -3 Herald of Torment, -1 Hero's Downfall.
Yeah, so it looks like McLaren actually has outmaneuvered Sigrist with this particular set of sideboarding, minorly at least, where McLaren took out 2 Banishing Light and Sigrist put in an Erase.
Planeswalkers continue to be powerful. This just in. I can tell you that, for example, we saw in that game, Sorin was only in play for a bare moment, essentially just to put a vampire into play. And then a bunch of turns later, well, that was McLaren dead. So here is Sorin Solemn Visitor.
Yeah, I mean, we just saw how good Sorin plays in this Abzan deck with Siege Rhinos earlier in the tournament. You know, the idea that your Siege Rhinos become 5/5s attacking into 4/5 Siege Rhinos and lifelink. That +1 ability is just very powerful. And again, it would be the same thing with Wingmate Rocks attacking into Wingmate Rocks.
Yeah, Sorin's +1 is good if you have a lot of creatures out, and its -2 is good if you don't. I mean, he's got pretty good versatility, and he ticks into an ultimate faster than just about any other Planeswalker. I mean, you play it at 4, it goes up to 5, that goes up to 6, and bam, you're there. I mean, I guess Sarkhan is also similar in that respect.
Right. It was interesting, the matchup against the blue-black control deck that we saw earlier. We saw Avon Flock. His opponent was like, oh, Sorin Solemn Visitor? Turns out that this card's insane if you can ultimate it against the blue-black control deck that is basically trying to win with 4 Prognostic Sphinx.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, they're trying to deck you, but they have a bunch of dig through time that they have to cast.
Huh. Yeah, that seems a little awkward. So that's Sorin Solemn Visitor. And these two, not a lot of joking around between these two at 1/1. McLaren always fairly taciturn.
I've seen him crack a smile, when he's winning Pro Tours.
Well, we may see that again in a couple of hours' time, but meanwhile, Mike Sigrist has ensured a Game 3. And actually, BDM, you had a chance to sit with both him and the rest of team face-to-face, and they seem like a really close-knit bunch of guys who, in addition to winning well together, like to just have fun well together.
In addition to winning well together, they like to make fun of each other losing together.
Sounds just like Channel Fireball.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
there's certainly a Channel Fireball influence on that team, right?
Well, I mean, I know Jacob Wilson and Sam Party have, they're from Northern California. They spend a lot of time playing, the same place as, Josh and Tom Martell and, all those other guys. So even if they're not regulars at the store at this point. And now they've kind of gone, back to their homelands. In the case of Jacob Wilson going back to Canada. Yeah, I mean, I would say that, the GP that Jacob Wilson won with Lingering Jun, GP Chicago, I mean, he beat Josh in the finals of that
Right.
GP. Josh gave him the deck list.
Right. He's sort of a little bit of a protege of Josh's.
Yeah, you could definitely say that.
They seemed very excited to get Mike Sigrist on the team as someone who is just, in that I just draft all the time. I'm able to synthesize a new draft format very quickly. And it's funny because they joked during the segment. They said, well, why is Sigrist your limited expert? And he's like, well, he's not very good at constructed.
Well, he beat me in the top 8 of GP Richmond, where he ended up actually getting third, with Affinity. And, I've played him a number of times, actually. He is very good at both limited and constructed.
Yeah. Paul Rietzel describes going into your move games for the first time in the late 90s as the, small child, and Mike Sigrist was already, entrenched there as a regular.
Yeah.
What do you think about the playtest in my head mode of Shaun McLaren?
I haven't actually spoken to him about it, so I don't know really what his method is.
He said what he likes to do is think about the matchup and kind of like rather than just play a bunch of games, and difficult since he's working mostly by himself. He thinks about the matchup and kind of imagines different scenarios and, kind of visualizes how he wants things to play out and what he needs to anticipate.
Yeah, I mean, I assume that works pretty well for him, given that he's now, in his second Pro Tour top 8 in a short span of time. But that's also how you come up with a plan of, like he did, boarding and dissolves in this matchup, which I would not have thought to do. I mean, I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, but
right.
3-mana counters against a deck with 2 and 3-mana creatures is not generally where you want to be. I guess he's very worried about cards like Sorin and Wingmate Rock. So that's the sort of thing. Again, I go back to these players must have tested some amount of these matchups in order to do things that on first blush might not be apparent.
Shaun McLaren, by the way, just to fill you in, the reason he's shuffling is he looked at an opening hand of just one land and just went, no, I cannot play a game 3 like this.
How many dissolves?
Only got as far as the one.
Well, there was 2 dissolves, but that is nothing for or against dissolve. When you have a one-land hand, you're not going to keep it. I mean, not in these decks, at least.
So Sigrist will give a last shuffle to McLaren's deck. Is Standard a format, the new fledgling format, where mulliganing is relatively straightforward and forgiving? Or is this the kind of format where when you don't get 7, you're in tons of trouble?
I don't think it's actually that horrendous. I mean, obviously, mulliganing is never something you want to do. But it is the sort of thing where if you mulligan, I mean, the cards are just so powerful. Like, if you look at McLaren's hand, he's got Secret of the Way, Rabble Master, Stoke the Flames, which is what he used to win game 1. You don't need a massive quantity of cards to win games with those cards.
Yeah, there is the hand for McLaren, and he is away. So here's the deciding game of semi-final 2. Canada's Shaun McLaren on the left, Mike Sigrist of the United States on the right.
So it sounds like, Shaun McLaren got your vibes, and Stoke the Flames went back to his sideboard to make room for a 4th dig through time.
Well, the whole game, too, he must have just been thinking, I just need to draw a dig. One dig, that's all I need.
Why can't I draw one? Oh, yeah. So there you can look at Mike Sigrist's numbers.
Yeah, and you talk about how experienced he is. It's worth saying that with that sort of close to 150 Pro Tour matches coming into this weekend, he actually has a very similar win percentage to Shaun McLaren, despite McLaren having won a Pro Tour already.
Secret of the Way comes down for McLaren. Let's see. There you get a look at Secret of the Way. Been a huge breakout card this weekend.
And McLaren very much looking for a third land here.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a lightning strike to tide him over, but if McLaren does not hit a third land and Sigrist goes, he's going to go Fleece Mane into Death Dealer into Siege Rhino, this could be problematic.
Right, backed up by a Sorin to put him out of reach of getting burnt out at all. Let's take a look at the hand that McLaren is looking for that third land for.
Well, drawing a Sarkhan is not the same as drawing a third land. In fact, it's the exact opposite.
Lightning Strike, Rabble Master, Stoke the Flames, and now a Sarkhan.
So Lightning Strike will take out the problematic or potentially problematic Fleece main line. That will trigger Prowess. Seeker of the Way will come in. And now it's back to the American on turn 3.
So McLaren's got an interesting play here. He drew a Bile-Blight, and he has Urborg, so he turns his Forest and Plains into lands capable of casting Bile-Blight. I like this. If you play the Death Dealer here and McLaren has another burn spell, it's much, much worse for you than if you just Bile-Blight the Seeker. And as it turns out, McLaren drew a Lightning Strike, so this is going to end up going a lot better for Mike Sigrist than it would have if he had cast the Rakshasa.
No blocks. So McLaren is now at the point of, am I trying to make this 3-3? No, I'm just going to wait to see your Bile-Blight happen. There it is.
And even if McLaren had wanted to do that, which I'm sure he did because he's trying to burn, Sigrist out, if Sigrist doesn't play anything on turn 3 with green, black, white mana and a full hand of cards, like, you've got to know that something's coming. That's just way too suspicious.
Right. So early advantage, very much, with Mike Sigrist.
And he's got to be worried about Disdainful Stroke here, but he's going to play a 4. Like, I don't think you can afford not to. And McLaren does not have a ton of Disdainful Strokes in his deck. He's got just the one.
And he decides to lead it off with Sorin. Do you tick Sorin up here, or do you go for the same 2-for-1 you went for last game?
I like ticking it up here, actually. I mean, I think ending up putting it in a point where McLaren has to use 2 burn spells is pretty good. At this point, McLaren is probably going to need to kill the Sorin. I mean, it's still pretty annoying to him.
You see, I really expected you to say that he would make the Vampire because with McLaren so low on mana, he's potentially having to spend multiple turns to actually get to the point where he can deal with that 2-for-1. It's not just a 2-for-1 in terms of cards, it's in tempo as well.
Yeah, you're not pressuring McLaren if you tick it up. That's certainly true. But if you tick it up, McLaren's tapping out twice in order to get Sorin off the board. So that could potentially be just, a little bit more value over the long term.
Sure.
You're not like in a race here as much, though you do want to kill McLaren before he draws a 3rd land.
Rabblemaster, Stoke and Sarkhan.
I actually like, for McLaren, Lightning Striking the 2-2 here. I think you have to just bank on drawing a 3rd land, and if you kill the 2-2, then drawing a 3rd land, playing Rabblemaster, and attacking Sorin for 1 is so much more powerful.
Yes, while McLaren play-tested that scenario in his head, he came to the same conclusion as you.
And then he also play-tested that he had a 3rd land, and here's Goblin Rabblemaster and attack. So Sorin down to 1.
We are going to see the slight downside of Rabblemaster here, because if Sigrist chooses to play a Siege Rhino and ticks up Sorin, or any other creature and ticks up Sorin, he could end up in a situation where the goblins have to attack into life-linked creatures.
Ooh.
All right, because Sorin's ability is a weird one in that it lasts through your opponent's turn.
Yep, complete turn cycle for the uptick. So those 3 cards sitting on the battlefield.
What are you taking here?
Yeah.
I think you take the Rabblemaster, rather.
Yeah.
If you take the Stoke, the problem is McLaren can play a 2nd Rabblemaster. They both make tokens. Then you attack a 3 Goblin tokens and now a 5-2 Rabblemaster, which is big enough that the Siege Rhino can't just eat it. If you take the Rabblemaster and then next turn you block a token, McLaren can then stoke the Siege Rhino. So it's getting pretty close, but I think that the Rabblemaster is pretty dangerous. So looks like Sigrist is just going to go with the Stoke. I'm sure he wishes he had a Bile-Blight right about now.
Siege Rhino putting in an appearance here in Game 3.
And this is exactly the scenario you talked about. Goblins have to attack into the Siege Rhino.
1917? Yeah.
Would you just trade for a Rabblemaster here?
I don't know how good that is. If you trade for a Rabblemaster, you end up with no Siege Rhino in play. Your Sarkhan is probably dying anyway, since or your Sorin rather, because I assume 3 Goblin tokens are heading into it. It's pretty close. If you kill a token, then McLaren still has 2 Rabblemasters, and you're in the same spot next turn with just a Rakshasa. So I guess I'd be inclined to kill the Rabblemaster, though. You're not in great shape either way. I mean, Rabblemaster's a powerful card. McLaren missed on his 3rd land drop multiple turns and still is turning it around here. This game would be pretty different if Sigrist played a Siege Rhino instead of the Sorin when McLaren was on 2 lands.
Right, but I guess felt like the Sorin was a card he was more willing to lose to a disdainful stroke.
I assume that he played his lower value card first because of that, yes.
Yeah. Here we go.
And McLaren even drew a Shivan Reef, which means that he's 1 land away from casting Sarkhan, which is also going to be very good here.
So here are the Goblin Horde.
That's Sorin.
So all the little goblins are aimed at Sorin. And Sigrist working out where he wants to block.
Sure. Yeah. So you
Sorin goes.
And break even on life.
There's the Shivan Reef. We go back to Sigrist, who has drawn a land.
Sigrist is really looking for here is a Bile Blight.
Bile would be sweet here.
But for now, it's Rakshasa Death Dealer. 2/2 brackets 4/4 regenerate at various points.
Rabble Master just gets out of control here.
And McLaren drew a Jeskai Charm, so he's got basically 3 options here. He can put one of, he has 2 different options in which creature to put back on top. He can also use the +1/+1 and lifelink ability.
guess I don't have to attack.
So in we go. And McLaren, for the second time in 3 games, is being the beatdown. Death Dealer in the way of 1 Rabble Master. Siege Rhino looking like about to get in the way of 1 Goblin token.
You afford to take the hit from the Rabble Master?
It's currently a 7. And at this point, I like +1/+1ing with Jeskai Charm to basically save your Rabble Master
Here we go.
and gain millions.
This one, lifelink.
+1/+1 and
My
lifelink.
gosh.
Gaining 22 life,
Oh,
dealing 13 to Mike Sigrist here. 14 even.
oh.
Yeah, that's 6 from the Unblocked Goblins and 8 from the Unblocked Rabble Master.
Shaun McLaren, boys and girls. Mulligans to 6, misses land drop number 3.
Fortunately, he didn't miss Rabble Master drops.
Yeah.
You had 3, I gained 16 plus
So-
8.
So for the full 24 actually, because even the blocked one. So yeah, that's a lot of life.
43 plays 3, we believe is the current thing.
14 or 19 plus 24.
40.
Well, Sigrist
Yeah,
has got a
40.
smile on his face, and so has McLaren, but those 2 smiles are not quite the same. Sigrist untaps, draws.
And McLaren doesn't even have the option to not kill Sigrist. He must attack.
Right.
with all his creatures.
Yep, if he wants more camera time, he's not going to get it. Sigrist passes. McLaren has Sarkhan in hand, but more importantly, it's all those goblins on the board. Little shake of the head from
Oh my
Sigrist.
gosh.
There's the handshake. The run for Sigrist is over, and the Pro Tour Born of the Gods champion, Shaun McLaren, has transported himself to Tarkir. The world may be different, but the result is the same. He is through to the final where he will meet Arilax. It will be Abzan midrange against Jeskai wins. Wow!
I guess it doesn't matter for Shaun McLaren whether it's modern or standard. He's still just playing Jeskai cards in both formats.
Yeah, a little more beat down this time, but
Yeah.
definitely the same kind of cards.
That was a startling match because early in that game 3, you're kind of really hoping for McLaren just to actually get to a point where we can have a game. And the gap, that's the first time today we've seen Rabble Master just go, okay, thanks, Khans of Tarkir, but here am I. Boom. Great stuff. Well done, Shaun McLaren. And congratulations to Mike Sigrist and Heather, his wife, watching from the floor. A great run. Enjoy Maui. See you at GPLA, maybe. They're talking about cutting a Maui holiday short in order to come to LA for a Grand Prix.
Things change a little bit once you top 8 a Pro Tour at the beginning of a season.
Certainly.
They certainly do. I can tell you that the players will be back in just a few short minutes. So you'll see Shaun McLaren again. You'll see Ari Lax again. What a headline final that's going to be. Can McLaren go the distance and become a 2-time Pro Tour champion in a year? Don't you dare go away. We'll be finding out soon. But for now, let's take you back to the news desk and Marshall Sutcliffe.
Wow, welcome back to the news desk. Marshall Sutcliffe. I've got Zach Hill and Hall of Famer Randy Buehler with me. And whoa, baby, we got a nice finals lined up here. Let's take a look at how these players got there. We've got the bracket showing the entire top 8 here. And yeah, we'll take a look at that. And wow, what a great story that we have coming in here with Shaun McLaren as well. We can see that he got by Li Shitian and now Mike Sigrist to put himself in the finals there in the upper bracket. Mike getting by Ivan Floch in the quarterfinals and then falling there in the semis. On the bottom side of the bracket, we have Ari Lax getting by Thiago Saporito in, calling it a mirror is probably not fully correct, but close enough. And then, of course, Ari beat Yuya Watanabe in the quarters. Thiago got by Andre Strosky, but again, he fell to Lax. So that sets the stage for what is sure to be a fireworks final here. Let's take a look at our first finalist, Ari Lax. He is, wow, I mean, he's a pretty young guy still. You know, for somebody that's been playing Magic as long as he has and has sort of just been around the Magic professional scene, he's only 24 years old.
Yeah, he's been playing for a while, 7 GP top 8s. The Pro Tour is his first Pro Tour top 8, but he's gotten 9th and like 10th a couple of times. I mean, he's been so close, working with an incredibly talented group of players on Team TCG Player. And really, it's been a long time coming for Ari. I mean, you don't get to 147 lifetime pro points before this event without really, you know, sort of earning your place on the Pro Tour. So this is Ari's big moment.
Yeah, no, Ari's a guy. You know what else this is? It's Ari playing for Platinum for the second time in his career.
Is it really?
There's a famous match, literally the last round of the Swiss 2 years ago. He plays LSV. The winner gets to be Platinum for next season, and the loser doesn't. The loser's merely gold. LSV won the match.
Oh, man.
Now, Ari had played 3 previous win-and-ins for Pro Tour Top 8s before this weekend. He broke that streak, won the win-and-ins, so through to the top 8, but absolutely huge match. They do not come bigger than this match for Ari Lax.
Yeah, now let's take a look at his deck list here. He is on a mid-range Abzan build, Zach, that is, well, it's pretty big time. A lot of Planeswalkers in this build.
A lot of Planeswalkers, a lot of mana acceleration. We talked about Elvish Mystic in addition to Sylvan Caryatid. Of course, Courser of Krufix, the card many people said would define the tournament. Thoughtseize, one of the pillars of Standard, Hero's Downfall, Utter End. And yeah, the Planeswalkers that you're mentioning, Sorum, Solemn Visor. Ajani, Mentor of Heroes, a card that a lot of the Abzan decks didn't run, but we've seen it do tremendous work in the feature match area. And then, of course, Elspeth, Sun's Champion, a marquee card of the format. I think he's going to have to watch out for in this matchup, though, is as good as those cards are at winning these mid-range mirrors and as good as they are against traditional control opponents, McLaren has a lot of ways of dealing damage just directly to those Planeswalkers, whether it's through evasive attacking through a card like Sarkhan the Dragon Master or a Manus Rider, or just through burn spells. Those Planeswalkers are not likely to sit around on the table, so he's going to have to try and eke the value out of those that he can while they're on the board.
All right, why don't we take a look at his opponent now, Shaun McLaren, who, wow, you know, a year ago, we hardly knew this name.
You didn't know this guy at all.
Yeah, now look at him.
You want to talk about some elite company?
Yeah.
The list of players who've won 2 Pro Tours in the same calendar year has only got 2 names on it.
Jeez.
Nikolai Herzog did it. Kai Buddha did it. And yeah, the list of players who've won 2 Pro Tours in their entire career isn't that much longer.
No.
Tommy Hovey, John Finkel, Brian Kibler, Dirk Babarowski, Marco Bloom. That's it. And you know what else those guys have in common?
Huh.
Other than Marco Bloom, they're all in the Hall of Fame. That's the company this guy is playing for right here.
That's incredible.
2 Pro Tour wins just doesn't happen. I mean, you don't even finish your second handful of fingers when you count them up.
Right, and you know, for Shaun, I mean, this is still a fledgling career for him. I mean, he burst onto the scene with his first Pro Tour victory at Pro Tour Born of the Gods earlier. But now all of a sudden, he's poised to just stamp his mark on the Pro Tour scene and say, hey, I won 2.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the same calendar year. I mean, it's hard to believe, like, that was barely 6 months ago. You know, I mean, this was not a long time ago, and he really does so much of this work himself.
It's true.
You know, he's not part of one of these super teams.
We're actually so early in Shaun McLaren's career, he hasn't discovered the other two colors of Magic yet.
It's true. He's on
There's
blue,
only
white,
three
red.
colors, red, white, and blue. Those are the only colors in
Yeah,
Magic.
and you know, I think if he wins today, we're not going to see him ever venture over into
Why
those
would you
other two
change?
colors. So let's take a look at his Jeskai wins list. Go ahead, Zach.
Oh, I mean, I was just gonna say we joke about that, but that's something I think that's really, really powerful. I mean, if you know what your style of play is, you know what plays into your strengths, you know the way that you can kind of think about Magic effectively, there's something to be said for just saying, look, like this deck did well early in the season. I'm not gonna play test 40 different decks to try and figure out what the best possible list is in all theoretical worlds. I'm gonna go with what I'm good at, I'm gonna tune it to perfection, and I'm gonna show up at the tournament having played more matchups with this deck than certainly my opponents have probably played against it. You know,
and he's certainly the one doing all the work with this deck. We
Right.
talk about all the big super teams, and reminder, Shaun McLaren, we've been calling him a lone wolf. He doesn't have a team.
He says he tests with his brother and Magic Online.
Done. It's working.
Look,
I would
compare that to the spreadsheets and team meetings and houses that we see from the super teams. It's incredible.
Absolutely incredible.
Now, what about this list here? He's got kind of a different take, Randy, on Jeskai wins. A lot of the same stuff that we've seen from many of these, but a few kind of interesting additions with a couple of Anger of the Gods and a few
Yeah,
others.
I like this list a lot. I think that it's got the ability to play aggro or to play control-ish. The 4 copies of Dig Through Time, and we've been hitting that card pretty hard all day. Really, this has been the breakout weekend for Dig Through Time, where everybody realizes that just is one of the star contributors from Khans of Tarkir. He only has 1 Seeker of the Way, which is a thing, you know, it takes away a little bit of the aggressive potential of this deck. But it's been working great for him. And, you know, those Anger of the Gods, again, give him this ability to sometimes play aggro, sometimes play control, which is just, it's a great place to be where your opponent doesn't understand how to play against you, and you get to just customize your list based on whatever they're trying to do.
It also seems to be his specialty. You know, we were joking about him loving this 3-color combo, but the deck he won Pro Tour Born of the Gods with had very similar elements to what you just described, where it could play the control route and it could also just burn you out. You know, you could just start throwing. This deck is actually a lot like a standard version of that deck, although it doesn't have.
Mantis Rider is the
infinite.
key difference.
Yes.
It's really Mantis Rider and Rabble Master, between the two of them, give the deck the ability to just come out and win the game in, you know, 5-6 turns.
Yeah, which we actually saw in the last round there. Double Rabble Master piled on huge amounts of damage. Now,
After missing his 3rd land drop,
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
I walked away so feeling bad for the guy. He
Yeah.
couldn't find that 3rd land.
and he
No
just
problem.
turned that right around. Yeah, Siege Rhino not
Goblin
a
Rabble
problem.
Master doing some work.
That's right. Now, Zach, how do you make this matchup? You know, this is an Abzan mid-range deck. Normally, my thought would be a deck like this would chew up a deck like Jeskai.
Well, you know, I'd be a little bit more worried than that if I'm Ari. I mean, the thing is, you're relying a lot upon your planeswalkers to gain advantage. I don't know how long those are going to stick around. Now, you've got, obviously, Siege Rhino, a card that's amazing this matchup. It's been amazing all weekend. It's very important. However, Shaun's able to handle that. He's got access to Disdainful Stroke out of the board. He's got access to Dig Through Time to find cards. Also, he's playing the full 8 Temples. Which we haven't seen that much of in a lot of these other lists. So he's going to find the cards that matter. He's also got main deck Banishing Light. I think for Ari to be effective, he's going to really have to capitalize on his thought seizes, stripping away the answers that matter, prey upon the fact that a lot of McLaren's burn spells kill almost nothing in his deck. Lightning Strike, very few targets. Magma Jet, very few targets. And rely upon his creatures rather than his planeswalkers to get a clock on the battlefield that can end the game. I mean, he's got Courser, which generates unparalleled advantage. He's got Wingmate Rock, and he's got Siege Rhino. So he's got cards that can do the job.
If you're sitting in Shaun's seat, Randy, are you assuming that you're going to be the control player in this matchup or the beatdown player?
I think in game 1, I'm the beatdown. I mean, part of that is because he actually gets to be on the play first. These guys shook hands in the last round, actually round 15 yesterday. They were the two who were above the fray. They got to shake hands and draw, and then they drew in the last round. Their tiebreakers were like this far apart. So they could, in theory, have played for the 1 seed, and what they did was say, well, look, we'll just be the 1 and the 2 in some order. It won't matter unless we meet each other in the finals, and then we're just happy, right? Well, turns out McLaren had the slightly better tiebreakers. McLaren gets the play draw decision. So yeah, and I think the way his main deck is set up, he doesn't have as many answers as he will have after sideboarding. So I think he's the beatdown game 1, and then I think he becomes the control deck after sideboarding.
Now, which do you think he'd rather be?
I think he'd rather be the control deck. I think that, you know, his creatures are just smaller. I mean, its creatures are smaller. Ari's, it's really hard for him to come out hard enough to beat Ari down before those Siege Rhinos start hitting the board. And, you know, sometimes you can get a Goblin Rabble Master draw, and you can get multiple Mantis Riders, and you can just finish the game off. But it's kind of, I mean, unless he draws his Banishing Lights, it's kind of a race in game one. Now, I will say that you're talking about Planeswalkers in Ari's deck. We were talking earlier today about how good Wingmake Rock is against Planeswalkers. Mantis Rider,
yes,
it may be the best creature in the game at killing Planeswalkers.
Yes.
So I do like that edge, and it's another place where if Shaun can get, you know, a Mantis Rider or two in his draw, I like his chances a lot in game one.
Now, what about, we saw that there was an Anger of the Gods in the list. There's 2 of them, right?
2 main, 2 in the board.
Yeah, so how important is that in game one, whether he has that or not? How good is it against Ari?
It's not particularly good. I mean, it kills the Caryatids. It doesn't kill Siege Rhino. It doesn't kill Courser. He'd rather have them be Banishing Lights. I mean, he built his deck with 2 of each, figuring, okay, I've got 8 Temples. I've got 4 Dig Through Time. You know, I'll find the card that's relevant for the matchup I happen to be in. But his main deck is very much a sort of split the difference and have a couple cards for every matchup deck. Which is, again, why I think that sideboarding really favors Shaun here, because now that he knows exactly who he's playing against, he can pick the right 60 out of his 75.
Right. Now, if you're sitting, I'm going to put you in Ari's seat and you have a Thoughtseize, are you generally trying to take the threats away from your opponent, or are cards like Dig Through Time that give your opponent, you know, rote card advantage as you go down the game more important?
I mean, so much of that is just what else I have in my hand, Marshall. I mean, you know, if you have an answer for a creature, you're going to want to take Dig Through Time. If you think the game's going to go long, you're going to want to take Dig Through Time. But if you have a threat, you know, if you're about to cast Siege Rhino next turn, maybe you take Disdainful Stroke and say, I'm just going to beat you with this. I mean, that's what's so powerful about Thoughtseize, is that its value changes depending upon the context of the way you see the game playing out. So, you know, I think it's totally dependent upon when he casts it, what's in his hand, what's on his board, and how he sees the game itself progressing. So it's hard to answer that question without knowing what else is in his hand.
If you're in Shaun's seat, what do you want to protect the most? Your threats or your you know, card advantage / answers?
I mean, I hate to give the same answer Zach gave, but it depends.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does depend. Ari can get draws where you're just like Siege Rhino, rah, I'm going to kill the game before any of that late game shenanigans ever have time to matter.
Sure.
But you get these other draws where the cards kind of cancel each other out in trade, and now the game becomes this sort of Dig Through Time incremental advantage game where, you know, I think that Dig Through Times are better than Coursers at generating that sort of mid to late game incremental advantage. But I mean, a lot of stuff has to happen before we get there.
Right. And those Coursers, by the way, we talked about them for the last one. They're still going to be a super important card in this matchup, right? You know, dealing with cards like Goblin Rabble Master and, of course, generating random card advantage. Those are still going to be huge.
Yeah, and I think the life matters a lot. I mean, this is a deck that can burn you out. It has a lot of burn spells, Stoke the Flames, Jeskai Charm, Lightning Strike, Magma Jet. I mean, every point of life is getting closer and closer to negating one of those cards. Now, of course, those can be used as creature removal as well. It's not like you're making them blank, but I really do think the incremental advantage from a Courser, especially multiple Coursers, if that's able to happen, really does add up the longer the game goes.
Now, what's the most important thing for these decks from the big picture here? Are we talking about a grindy matchup here, or are we talking about more of like a game plan implementation type thing?
I mean, the way I see the game going, it's kind of this, I don't know, the shape of the graph would be really weird. I think that you can get out ahead early in a really decisive way. You know, like let's say from Ari's side, it's like, okay, I Thoughtseize your answer, I resolve a Rhino, I follow that up with a Rock. And then, you know, obviously McLaren can have draws like that too, where he just like burns an early creature, plays a Rabble Master, it goes through unopposed for whatever reason. So I see you being able to end the game in the first like 3 to 4 turns, you know, and not literally end it, but take over the game.
Decide it.
Right. But if each player is able to neutralize those threats with answers, then I see the game going not just a little bit long, but like really long. It's basically like, okay, I've done my crazy early game powerful thing, you've stopped it. Now we're settling in and seeing who can eke out advantage through, you know, a big Dig for Time or through Courser, Abzan Charm, things of that nature.
So those are the most important cards down the stretch. If our game, let's say we watch in the match here, we see an early scuffle where people sort of trade resources for a while and it goes long, what are the cards to look out for at that point?
Dig Through Time's the big card. I mean, for me though, Game 1, I think, is actually going to be more of a race. I think it's the sideboarded games that go long and go grindy and become this like, okay, who's going to eke out incremental advantage? I think that's what happens after sideboarding because McLaren, I think, will go slower. He'll bring in, end hostilities and maybe even Caranos, things like that. Game 1, I think a lot of it depends on McLaren's draw, but if I had to bet, I'd say it probably turns into a race. McLaren's going to be trying to burn him down from 20 as quickly as possible, and Ari's going to be, trying to just summon big monsters because it's not like Shaun can block anything he summons.
Right, and this is going to get interesting too because we've seen this Jeskai Wins deck burn people out from fairly high life total, but Ari is pretty well set up to not let that happen. Siege Rhinos plus his Coursers, those are going to help keep his life total afloat where he's not going to get in range of just maybe 1 or 2 burn spells. It's going to take multiple.
And Sorin also able to provide big life swings.
Right.
But I mean, I agree with Randy, though, that it is just very different game 1 versus the later games. After sideboard, Ari gets Bile Blight, which actually means that the best draws that Shaun can have, it deals with those. I mean, you really would love to be able to go Manus Rider, start hitting your opponent for 6 in the air. If your opponent doesn't have Bile Blight, that means you're probably going to win the game. If you cast, turn 3, turn 4 Manus Rider, your opponent has a Blight, suddenly your back's against the wall. And that means that these like burn spells that you're able to kind of force through damage here and there really do add up. So I think Randy's absolutely right, where, we're just going to see a very different type of game 1 versus in the post sideboard.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the list. It's right here, and I'm seeing that Ari's got 4 Abzan Charm and 3 Heroes Downfall plus 2 Utter End in the main. So given that that Shaun's deck isn't super threat dense, right? I mean, I wouldn't describe it that way with all of the burn spells kind of taking up space there. It feels like Ari's going to be able to take care of a couple of Mantis Riders or a couple of threats pretty easily on an average draw.
Yeah, he should. It's going to be interesting to watch. I know that Ari certainly didn't have any trouble with the Jeskai Wins deck that he played in the quarterfinals. I mean, played 2 different Abzan mid-range versus Jeskai Wins in the quarterfinals, and the Abzan mid-range just showed them both sides of their hand.
All right, so let's see. They're ready. The players are ready down in the feature match area. It is time now to go for the finals. Here from Hawaii, let's throw it down to the booth where Richard Hagan, Brian David Marshall, and Luis Scott Vargas are ready to bring you all the action.